I think that's really important. People who don't just bitch about a problem will also go, here's a way I think you could solve this problem as well, which I appreciate.
English proficiency in general, how did this first pop on your radar, and how soon did you realize that it's a problem that needed to be fixed?
So I think that's a great question, and I didn't realize the history of English language proficiency, how President Obama had changed it at the end of his administration. It's interesting, which I mentioned earlier today at a press conference, how vocal truckers are. Right? When there's a problem, they make sure that I know about it, and they tag me and tweet at me, and I see Facebook posts, which is really great. So they were bringing it to my attention, and probably we had some aviation issues at the start, but probably on week 2 or 3, we started working on this issue. We were coordinating with the White House and the president obviously loves truckers. And so he wanted to be involved as well. And so we partnered up, worked together, which brought us to his executive order and then brought us here today to Texas. And just quick, like, all the states are great, and we have people that live all across the country, which is wonderful. But Texas really does do a wonderful job in transportation, and we commend them. And one of the reasons why we wanted to come down here today for this announcement.
And one of the things you mentioned there, I thought was interesting, is that this is by no means a final step. You're kind of viewing this as a first step. You mentioned non-domiciled CDLs being a major issue, and I'm sure you've heard about that as well from the people who are tweeting at you and everything. But talk about what that process is going to look like as you go through all of these regulations that either have not been enforced or maybe are overburdensome for people out there. Talk about that process and what that looks like.
Yeah, so this one was actually relatively easy, in the sense that we're able to roll back the rule that Obama put into place, and actually make it a consequence of taking a driver out of service, a truck out of service, if they can't speak English. This one was a pretty straight path forward. These other issues get to be more complicated, and the issue's not complicated. How you fix the issue becomes more complicated. It's not as simple as what we did here today, and so. When you do this, you want to do it right. You want to make sure the change that you make is lasting and has a true impact. And so what we're doing now is, even on for trucker parking, we're thinking through, where do we get the resources? How do we partner? Where can we invest? So the problem is a really simple problem, but the answer becomes a little more complicated, thinking through how would we deploy a set of policies to improve parking for our truckers. And we're working on that, as well as when we have truckers coming in from specifically Mexico, or in Canada, and having one destination, then going to multiple others, it becomes a little harder to enforce. So we're thinking through that process, and I think as we do that, we're going to get to a good place on what our rules should look like and how we can enforce them.
You recently had a deregulatory comment period, and I looked through the comments, and I know you've got a little bit of everything there. Hours of service came up quite a bit. ELDs came up quite a bit as well. I know FMCSA is probably looking through those comments. I'm not sure you can speak too much about what the next step is going to be, but you said something earlier about reading the comments from truck drivers who are tweeting at you, or Facebook or whatever it may be on social media. What would you say to those folks who are concerned about hours of service and would like to see some changes there and some more flexibility as they try to do a job that, as you know, is a very difficult job?
So I think it's important to understand that when people come up with ideas for rules, they see it as black and white. And the hours of service can be one of those where they can think through, we got safety data and we're going to put this policy in place, but I don't think it takes into account actually how someone might navigate a day on the road. And I'm sensitive, and I don't want to say a whole lot. I understand the viewpoint of the truckers out there on the electronic logs. Understand that as well. I get it. We have to go through a process, and again, safety is always a priority, right? And I think a lot of the comments I get are about rule changes, but also safety. Those two things are combined. Again, everyone wants to be safe. You want to come home to your family. You don't want to hurt anyone on the road. And so the comments are given to me with the backdrop, with the safety component. But we have to. There's a very specific process that we have to go through at USDOT. But maybe I'll leave the simple answer is, I get it. I understand the point, and you don't find a lot of disagreement from me.
Broker transparency, and I heard you all talking earlier a little bit about this, but broker fraud, as you have probably learned if you didn't know before, is a huge issue out there. Broker transparency, especially. FMCSA is making some progress on that. We're seeing some action, which is very welcome. But talk a little bit about that and assure people, I suppose, that this is not going to be just the only step. This is the first step toward keeping these folks accountable.
Yeah, so it's a great question. This is an issue that I didn't know existed either on the broker side, but obviously Motor Carriers has been following this for some time. So I've had a number of meetings on this issue, and again, it gets to be a little bit complicated on how do we root out the bad players and not put rules in place that are burdensome and harmful and hurtful to the good players, right? And so we're working on that right now, but that is an issue I care about. And again, there's too much fraud, and I think some of these brokers partake in some of the fraud that's taking place around the country. Another thing we're thinking through and working with our partners is the theft issue. We think it's coming from an organized crime side of those who are participating in crime, whether it's with trucks or with rail. And I don't think the last administration really seemed to care. It seemed like it was open season. If you can dupe someone or steal from someone, so be it. Good for you. That's not our perspective. Again, it's driving up the cost of products and the cost of the industry, driving up the cost of insurance. And so, so again, that's also on our radar. And I would just tell you to stay tuned because we're working through it and trying to be smart. And but by the way, I do appreciate the comments and feedback because it's not just a complaint. Oftentimes, I'll get ideas on why don't you do it this way? Why don't you think about it like this from the industry? And I think that's really important. People who don't just bitch about a problem will also go, here's a way I think you could solve this problem as well, which I appreciate. Maybe there's a lot of time in the truck to think about what policy prescriptions fix problems. But again, I want to go back to my point. A very engaged group, a very thoughtful group, who just want to be able to do their job, stay safe, and make a good living for their families.
You had a CDL, right? Do you currently have one as well?
So I drove bus in Breckenridge, Colorado, in between undergrad and law school. So I was probably 22. I got my CDL to drive bus in Colorado, which, by the way, I enjoyed. And then I needed that to drive our lumberjack trucks. We had flatbed trailers with our 45-foot trees on the trucks. So I wasn't driving an 80-pound big rig, but I needed my CDL for the vehicles that we drove. By the way, I actually am very proud of my CDL, or was proud of it. I made sure I kept it. I was in Congress. I had my CDL. But I had to move from Wisconsin to New Jersey. And when I switched my license over, about 5 months ago, it was challenging to keep my CDL. By the way, it was hard when I was going through. I think it was at the DOT in New Jersey for 3.5 hours. They're like, you can come back and you can go get your medical and we'll let you keep your CDL. I'm like, I'm not coming back here. I'm good. I'm going to let it go. So up to 5 months ago, I had my CDL, and so for 30 years I had it.
Well, I'm curious too by hearing that ordeal, and we've all been to the DMV and we all know what that's like. But that process and your history with a CDL, how does that shape your job now? I imagine it gives you some insight, at least, into what folks are dealing with out there.
It does, but also in northern Wisconsin, central Wisconsin, we have great businesses, great people who run trucking companies, and I've got to know them very well, got to know their businesses, spent a lot of time with them over the course of my 9 years in Congress. And so not just what I did when I was doing my lumberjack work and driving trucks across the country, but also then got to see the business side when I was in Congress. And so I've had a lot of interaction and interfacing with the industry in both perspectives. And I just can't tell you, one of my best friends back at home just retired as a trucker. And I think it's so important. I think people sometimes might not understand what happens when you don't have people who are willing to get behind the wheel of a big rig and deliver products across the country. And I understand how important it is. And again, I want to make sure that it's smart how we engage. And again, I think it's by the way, the opportunity side of this I think is really wonderful. I don't think we talk about it enough. For young people to come in, after go into some schools, get some schooling, get some behind the wheel, and get out and make a really good living right away. I don't think we promote that enough, and I think we should. And I think our schools, our counselors direct people towards a 4-year degree. Well, everyone's not made for a 4-year degree, and they might get it, but they'll never use it, and they'll be saddled with a lot of debt. This is a great space where people can come in and again make a good living and support their families.
To that point too, training centers, making sure that the young drivers who are on the road are ready to be on the road and know how to do everything, basically. Is that going to be a priority for you too, in terms of building up the younger generation and bringing them into the fold here and making sure they're trained in the process?
Well, I think, again, with regard to the training centers, this is what we did today was really about safety, right? English proficiency is about safety, making sure we have schools that are training up well-trained students. When they get on the road, they're going to be safe. They know how to operate their rigs and do it in a way that's professional and safe is critical. I think we have to look at who does it well, and if there's actors who don't do it well, we'll take action. If you have any advice or information out there of some who don't do it well, happy to hear from you. I'm sure I'll hear anyway, but just by saying that from you all. But yeah, so. Yeah, that's my philosophy. We want good ones. If there's bad ones, we want to shut them down, or actually get them to start teaching a curriculum that's going to put good drivers on the road.
And I know your time is short here. Just in closing, and I think you've delivered a lot of messages to the truck drivers out there, and I think it's clear that you care about what they're dealing with out there and what they're seeing and what they have to say to you. But just a final message to the truck drivers out there, as they go about their business.
Yeah. So when I took this job, I was told that your whole 4 years can be driven by crisis to crisis to crisis, and the big things that you thought about that you wanted to do when you came, you won't accomplish because you're just going from one crisis to the next. And when I came in a day after I was sworn in was the DCA air crash. And then we had 2 days after that was the air crash in Philadelphia. There's been a lot that's happened. And so I've seen firsthand that you can be driven by crises. And that's a long way to answer your question, that I'm driven to make sure that on my team, even though I might have to go deal with certain hot spots, my team and I are driving good policy to change how government interacts with people and industry in a positive way, in a smart way, in a streamlined way. And so your industry has a friend in DOT. I look forward to partnerships. And again, I think we come up with great ideas, but I do think, from industry, great ideas percolate there as well. And so when those ideas come up, it's a two-way street. You should share them with us. So just don't comment on our ideas. Share your ideas, share best practices, share ideas with us on what you think we should be thinking about. Or if we're thinking about something and you think, yeah, I'm happy you're thinking about it, but if you just thought about it a little bit differently, you'd be far more successful. That's the partnership that actually gives us better results. And so I'm not going to be driven by crisis. I have a lot of priorities, and I'm going to continue to drive all of those priorities as we go through this 4 years of President Trump's tenure. And by the way, we're about 10% through this president's presidency, or our time at DOT. Time flies, I guess, but you realize time is limited. And again, I want to have the biggest impact possible, and your industry is a priority for me, and making sure we can be safe, but also allow more efficiency and more common sense rules is where I'm at.